Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is David Novak. I am going to do a booktube sort of thing and open up a package. But first, I thought I would talk briefly about Franz Kafka. I'm not really sure what I'm doing with this channel anymore. I just did a recent reads video, which I referred to as a perfunctory installment. I'm not sure if that's something that should continue to be a regular feature of this channel. Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads made mention in his latest video something to the effect that he had been wanting to do other things besides making videos, but as a content creator, he felt he should be doing such. Well, I really don't care for the term content creator, and it's not something I really see myself doing all that much of. I've been having fun with BookTube. I've said that probably come January 6th may be the time for me to relinquish this channel. We shall see. If I was a content creator ever, it was when I was actively writing poetry. That was the content that I was creating. Everything ultimately is ephemera, but I tend to think YouTube videos are probably more than much else ephemera. We know that digital things don't tend to last, whereas paper has enormous staying power. But who knows? At this stage, the books that I have written exist mainly in digital form unless somebody decides to go to lulu.com and buy them. Now the first ones are out there mainly in paper, but I don't see much prospect of anything surviving very much. But I picked up my old copy of America by Franz Kafka. I believe it's a Willa and Edwin Muir translation, as all of the old ones were. Preface by Klaus Mann. I didn't read the preface this time. I know I've read it in the past. Yeah, translated by Willa and Edwin Muir. I believe there are a lot of new translations and that chapters have been shuffled around. So it's kind of rare to be seeing something that's not a Penguin classic anymore. Although I believe that Schocken still has a good Kafka library. So I thought I would show you my old copies of Kafka. I like doing this show and tell thing, and among authors, Kafka is one that is always at hand, even though I've hardly looked at him in decades. He probably was my first author. I've mentioned that at a certain point in time when I realized that I was a poet, I decided that I had to educate myself, and the books that I opted for as my first reads were a couple by Ernest Hemingway, the Nick Adams stories, and The Movable Feast, or A Movable Feast, and then the works by Henry David Thoreau, Walden and Civil Disobedience. But it may well be that before that I was reading Kafka just for my own pleasure. I'll show you my original copy of The Trial. And I don't know if you can see the price tag. This is from a bookstore that used to be in a lot of the malls named B. Dalton Booksellers. And that's pretty much where I got it. Now, I would have heard about this in school. So I was 16 at the time. And when I lament my lack of education, I am referring to the public education that I had. Just the way things worked out for me, I wound up starting college a little bit early. So this was an author that I found out about in my first English 101 or whatever class, and we read the Metamorphosis. And I liked it, and I investigated more, and I became a diehard reader of Kafka. So this was my first book. The Castle, was my second, and I loved this one most of all. But these are my original copies, which I don't think I would part from. I had also a little mass market paperback. I believe it was called The Essential, Franz Kafka. And everything that was in The Essential would ultimately appear in other volumes that I had. So in those early days when I was working temp jobs up in Evanston, I was working with a guy. Just by pure chance, during the course of all my temp jobs, I worked with 3 different guys who were brothers from Guyana. And this fellow, his name was John, but I don't think it was spelled John, was really interested in Kafka. And so it was my last day at the job, and I made a gift of my little edition to him. I sort of wish I still had it just for sentimental purposes, but there was nothing in there that I don't have in another form. And there's a lot of Kafka going around on BookTube these days. I believe there may be a new edition of his diaries. And so it's something that I may look into. I am enjoying America so much. As I say, I've hardly touched Kafka since those days, 40 whatever years ago. And this was a book that I attempted to read at least twice and just could not do it. A friend commented something to the effect that this book doesn't really have the same preponderance of bureaucracy that you find in the other 2 novels. But I realize in this one, it's there bursting behind the scenes. So it seems like a much more conventional novel. And how far am I now? I've got 2 chapters to go, so I'm 200 some pages in, and just loving it. I mentioned that for the first time, returning to Kafka, I have the feeling like I wish I could exist in a world of pure Kafka, of pure language. And that harkens back to the feelings that I had when I first heard Mozart. I felt, I was in a chorus and we sang his Requiem. I felt, to exist in a world of pure sound. Of course, it's not possible, but it is lovely to be back experiencing Kafka. So I will probably talk more about this when I finish the book, but I thought I would just show you the other things I have on hand. Now, I've mentioned a friend of mine, Marcia Gustafson, who was a friend and something of a literary mentor to me. And she died, it might be 10 years ago now, and she asked me to be the person who disposed of her library, and I did. But these were 2 volumes that I took. One is her copy of The Trial, and one is her copy of The Castle. And that was an early point of reference between us. Independently, we both loved Kafka, and so we had that in common. As I say, Kafka was a discovery of mine early on. And then I have a couple of other books. There's the complete stories. I would like to possibly get some better copies of these, but I'm really pleased with the Willa and Edwin Muir translations. I think most of these are that. And this is a well-used edition. I bet there's something more complete now after all these years. And then something that I picked up probably pretty cheaply somewhere, I Am a Memory Come Alive, which is excerpts from journals and whatnot, autobiographical writings. I would really like to get the diaries at this point. I also had, substantial collections of his letters, letters to Felice and letters to Milenia, I think. And they were in Spanish, and I never read them. And I had, and still have somewhere, the letter to his father, which is in Spanish. I don't have it in English. I don't think it's in any of these. I did read that though, but I'm supposing I must have read it in English somewhere, but maybe it's in one of these things. Maybe indeed it's in this autobiographical writings. And then just something else that I picked up at one point, reminiscences by Max Brod, the man who saved his stuff from immolation. Kafka requested that he destroy all of his work, and Max decided not to. God bless you, Max. And this is his biography, which is very lovely. Now, people are often very critical of Max Brod nowadays. I have not followed any of the controversy, so I don't know about that. I read this a long time ago and liked it. As I say, if I were to return at this point, I would be returning to Kafka's own writing of some sort. And this America is really whetting my appetite. Now, when I read Kafka, it was novel. It was unlike anything I had ever read before, unlike any experience that I had known. And I was gradually, there's the daisy chain whereby you read one author and then that author leads you to another author. And that was how my autodidact literary education occurred. And I read somewhere, it must have been in an introduction, and for years I mistakenly had the idea that what I read was that one of Kafka's influences was Nikolai Gogol. And so I proceeded next to Gogol's Dead Souls and his stories, and that became a big avenue for me. But in times since, I've tried to see if there were any kind of relationship. Had Kafka read Gogol or no? I don't believe so. I've never seen any evidence of that. So it must have just been somebody writing about Kafka somewhere and saying something, maybe the unreality, the feeling of unreality or whatever resembles Gogol. I really don't know. So Kafka was original, unlike anything I had ever seen. But now going back to America, which, as I say, seems like a more conventional novel, I realized that there may well be a consonance of sorts between him and another favorite author of mine, of whom I have not read very much, and whose books I have on my list, which I, as not having been a strong reader, I've built up all these ambitions of things that I would like to read. And this author's books are among those, and I have a certain set of 6 books by this author. I showed 6 books of the Chinese Empire series by Harvard that I've taken a stab at and failed on. And these I've never even opened up. But the author, of course, I'm talking about is B. Traven. And he's a bit of a mysterious figure. Nobody really knows much about him. He is well known for The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, which was made into a hit movie. But the book that Reading America has made me go to is one that I did try to read and failed to read for a very different reason. Now, in the old days, I was a user of the Chicago Public Library. The library has fallen on hard times. And I checked this book out, but it was a case of the Chicago Public Library only had it in one copy, and that copy was busted in the spine, and it was really inconvenient to read. And then I could never find a good copy of it for sale cheaply. And in the case of the Chicago Public Library, at that time, people always said, if you see a damaged book, do not tell them about it because they will just throw it out. That's what the Chicago Public Library under Mary Dempsey became famous for, throwing out books. So I returned it and said nothing, and they still have only one copy, and I bet it's that same copy. So it is The Death Ship, and it purports to be a very interesting story. Let me see. The Death Ship tells the story of an American sailor, stateless and penniless because he has lost his passport, who is harassed by police and hounded across Europe until he finds an illegal job shoveling coal in the hold of a steamer bound for destruction. So America starts with The Stoker, the first chapter is called, but it also serves as a standalone story in some anthologies. And so there is right off a interesting vibe here, I think. This story involves a young European man coming to America, where he enters the port and sees the Statue of Liberty holding her upraised sword. That said, I believe that Kafka captures an awful lot about American life in a genuine way, a place he had never visited, just solely imagined. Of course, a lot was known about America, and I think he foresaw trends. So I'm enjoying it very much. When I'm finished, I will revisit the introduction and see what was said. I think mention is made that the portrait of America in this book is fantastical and absurd. I don't find it so. I find it very realistic. So I hope to undertake this very soon. I was fortunate in that I found a reasonable copy. I think this is the Lawrence Hill books. I'm not sure if there was any kind of a relation between Lawrence Hill books and Ivan R.D., because other ones that I have were Ivan R.D., a great old-time Chicago publisher that I think may not exist anymore. I bet Lawrence Hill doesn't either. But so I'm going to do that fairly soon, I hope. And so the book set of 6 was his Mahogany series, and I'll show you the 6 books. There's Government, the Carrera, March to the Monteria. That looks like a painting by one of the muralists, doesn't it? And the next one, Process, unfortunately came in a hardback. I mean, it would be nice to have them all one way or the other. At this point, I don't care because I'm not going to be holding on to anything much longer. But that's the 4th book in the series. And the 5th, The Rebellion of the Hanged. And then the 6th, General from the Jungle. And while I was pulling those out, I saw that I have a book called The Bridge from the Jungle, which the back blurb says it is considered to be his finest novel. I have Treasure of the Sierra Madre somewhere too in a different edition, and I tried to read that once and failed. So I may well undertake all of this, but for the I think, I don't know if I just said that, but I think I bought it mistakenly, believing it was part of the Jungle series as it's become known. So I called it the Mahogany series. I think that might be another way of referring to it. The first book was Government, and let me just read you what it says. In what have become known as the Jungle novels, B. Traven wrote during the 1930s, an epic of the birth of the Mexican Revolution. In these books, Traven described the conditions of peonage and debt slavery under which the Indians suffered while power in Mexico was in the hands of one man, Porfirio Diaz. Government is the first of the 6 Jungle novels, depicting the political corruption that infected even the smallest villages in Mexico. The novel tells the story of Don Gabriel, a minor government functionary who has a virtual license to steal from the Indian village where he is secretary, except that the Indians have nothing to steal. By chance, he finds an opportunity in the labor agent business, shanghaiing luckless Indians into debt slavery so that he can ship them off to work in the great mahogany plantations owned by foreign capital. The novel reaches its climax in a clash of cultures between the simple dignity of the illiterate Indians and the cynicism and corruption of the politicians and petty bureaucrats. I won't read you all of the back covers of the rest of the series, but it is a series that I want to get into before too long. It's been my ambition to do so for a very long time, and my reading skill has just never been there. But now I'm thinking, well, in January, I read War and Peace by Tolstoy, so what the heck? I should be able to read B. Traven. But the first one that I will undertake, of course, will be The Death Ship. Now, I'm planning to look at Huckleberry Finn soon, so it may have to wait until I'm done with that. I don't know if I showed you this collection. There's nothing in here that's not elsewhere, except it has his aphorisms, which they've titled such. And the aphorisms are very good. I believe there is a new edition with these. I mean, I'm just reporting hearsay from booktubers that I've been watching. As I say, a lot of people seem to be delving into Kafka these days. And if I do purchase some new editions of Kafka, and this is duplicated, this is a book that I would happily put into the neighborhood book box. I don't have any great emotional tie to this particular book. The reflections, the aphorisms were in that essential Kafka book, which I gave away so many years ago. So I had to hold on to this. And I should say, I have come across that book since that same edition. It must have been widespread, and decided not to pick it up again because I just didn't need it. So this is where I have been lately, and I will report further as I have further news to report about my reading of Kafka and other matter. So thank you very much for stopping by my channel.